Welcome to CreateFest 2020. We are online this year. I am delighted that you can all join me today. CreateFest is an initiative by Waterford Cultural Quarter, funded by Waterford Council and in association with Creative Ireland. So today we're going to kick it off with our design panel featuring John Gavin from TrueOutPut, Michael Fitzgerald, one of the project twins, and James Fitzgerald, the other project twins. So we're going to keep it quite informal today and just enjoy ourselves. We'll be taking questions from yourselves if you'd just like to comment in under Facebook, and they'll be relayed to me. So guys, you're very welcome today. How are you all?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
So how did you get into design first? John, we'll start off with you, John. How did you get into design first, John?
I became a graphic designer. Well, I mean, I suppose if you could track it back to, it's hard to kind of say there was an epiphany moment that led me into it, but I guess I'd always that kind of thirst to create and make things, take things apart, and you know, I was kind of drawn to things that were well made, or I suppose well designed, and I had a great art teacher that encouraged me to think about going to art college. There was also this Christian brother that I happened to pass by his dark room one day. I didn't know what it was at the time, and you know, I had a chat with him, and he said, "Well, if you're interested, you know, get a roll of film and take some photographs, and I'll show you how to develop them." So, photography is a massive part of graphic design, and I guess that was kind of one other little piece in the puzzle. But I guess when I was in school, you know, nobody knew what graphic design was, so. I suppose still a lot of people don't, but it, you know, it was an obscure career choice at the time. There was also another point, I think, when I discovered what actually the term graphic design. There was a book in a secondhand bookshop about graphic design from America, and I guess it opened me up to the people behind the studios that had created these finished logos, basically designers. So you know, I think at that point then I realized, I guess, there was something out there, or maybe a career path that you know, was available to me. So
and if you were to describe it to a layperson, what would you like? How would you say to a layperson, what is graphic design?
It's changed a lot. I mean, it used to be called commercial art. So you know, I think the reality is it's a way of communicating ideas or thoughts, and that could be anything from you know, creating logos for companies that express what they do and give them some definition, to designing products or anything like that. And you know, from when I started out in graphic design in college, it was very much a traditional way of looking at things. But you know, today we do everything from, you know, we've just designed a bottle, we do interiors, we do, you know, 3D environments, and all sorts of different types of applications. So I guess graphic design has probably changed an awful lot over the years about categorizing it. It's quite difficult, I guess.
And what about you, James? What about yourself? How have you got into it, or what inspired you?
I think pretty similar, really. I suppose like anyone in school, just being into art and things like that. Again, like growing up in Tipperary in Cashel in the 90s, yeah, nobody really knows what graphic design was back then. Our older brother was actually had been in art college, or he had just gone to art college studying fine art and painting, so kind of had a bit more of an idea of different kind of disciplines that you could study in art college. And I suppose graphic design was something we were both drawn to. Myself and Michael studied graphic design together, as well as working together now. So
I suppose I should point out, I don't know if I need to, that you're twins. So you and Michael are brothers, obviously. Point that out to people. Do you think that's influenced your work much over the years? That I suppose you do working together. Did you go to college together?
Yeah, it has. Like, we didn't originally plan on working together. We went to college together, and I think we were always going to do something art or design related. And it just so happened that we both got accepted into the same graphic design course. It wasn't a plan to work together either then. Afterwards, like we worked in a few different places. I worked in a different design studio. Michael worked in an ad agency, and we kind of started working together. It was like 5 or 6 years after we kind of finished college.
And what brought you together?
The recession of 2008, really. We'd both been kind of, yeah, I think a lot of like kind of startups and stuff, that's kind of how it really started back then. I was in Australia in like 2006, 2007. So it was, then I went to New Zealand and Michael came over. I worked in a graphic design place in Sydney for a while. We were doing a lot of labels for, quite different to what we do now, but we're designing like labels for wine bottles and kind of mixed in other graphic design stuff, branding and things like that. But we both came back to Ireland around 2009, the end of 2009 or something like that, I think it was. So there wasn't really any work going, and we kind of just started doing a few bits and pieces together. We were essentially just on the dole at the time, thinking about where we were going to move to, whether we'd go to Canada or go to London, the same as a lot of people. But we started kind of doing stuff together, and it kind of developed from there.
And Michael, what would your biggest influence be on your creative output? Is that a bit loaded question there? Or where would you find, like, where would you be inspired from? What inspires you in your work?
We lost him.
Have we lost Michael? Michael, I think we have lost you at the moment. Yeah. Well, what about yourself, John or James? What would your influences be? Sorry, Michael, we just lost you for a second while we were trying to get you back.
I mean, I guess influence, yeah, it's kind of, it's quite a broad, it's a broad, range of sources, I suppose, inspiration, where that might come from. I look at graphic design less and less now than, I would look towards art or film or music or even nature, even things like comedy or, banter with friends is actually often quite inspirational. I mean, in terms of, influence in the creative process, I don't know, I think every studio or designer uses a similar process, whether they like it or not. And, often just it's wrapped around, discover, find, design, deliver, something like that. But yeah. I find design is more of an art than a science, and it's quite hard to compartmentalize it that easily. Something like I think the reality of the design process is really, really messy, and that's, we're not making stuff like, concrete blocks that are the same thing every day, and there's no variation. And I guess to be honest, the creative process is more like moving from a space of creative play and experimentation to kind of blind panic as the deadlines loom. And I think that's probably a more realistic look at the creative process than something that, some people have kind of wrapped this design thinking into a way to kind of plug design into things. So you've got some product business and you just go, well, let's stick some design onto it and it'll solve all problems. But I think that's, a bit of a naive way of looking at it. And, it doesn't really work that way. And I guess it's a way for people to kind of rationalize that, in design, there's a lot of things that are instinctive or irrational. And those points, I think, actually make things more interesting. And when you start to try and rationalize it into something that is a system or a science, it starts to maybe not have those unexpected results and often better results.
And James, yourself, what other designers would influence you? Like, who would like influence your work? Like John is saying about nature, and he would, draw a lot of stuff from friends. And I suppose you're always looking for influences in your work. So, what designers would you find interesting, or artists?
Yeah. I kind of picking up a bit on what John was saying about like when we were in college, we would have had less access to a lot of designers. So like in college, a lot of the stuff that I was into might have been like some of the bigger names, Paul Rand and Saul Bass, and kind of still like the poster designers like Abram Games and some other graphic designers and kind of interesting stuff at the time, like Stefan Sagmeister. But I kind of find now it's changed so much. I think Instagram kind of changes a lot of it as well. Because like back then, I kind of remember having like specific people you're into, and there might be 10 or 20 people you're coming across through books, whereas like 20 minutes now on Instagram, you come across like 100 different people and different things. So there's so many, it reaches a point where it's kind of hard to tell where influences come from. But again, like he said as well, looking more and more at, or less and less at design, and I suppose myself and Michael, our stuff kind of moves more into art and different things, kind of using a design process. So again, talking to friends, like comedians sometimes might give you more than looking at just a nice logo in a way.
And when you say comedians, what do you mean?
Kind of like a lot of design I kind of see as being witty. There's something kind of funny in it, and that's I kind of see it a lot in like Irish comedians as well. It's kind of using wit and like that kind of idea of a turn of a word or something or a phrase. I kind of see a lot of similarities to that kind of way, something in a logo or some graphic where it's something witty, where it's a turn of an idea or something. So not that it's like directly related, but I think just that general kind of idea of thinking kind of seeps into it or something in some way.
Yeah, I think it's funny that comedy being it's such a fine art form, and listen to comedians or even podcasts about the way they work, and it's a fragment, a gag, a joke, or whatever is a very small fragment that's been honed and balanced and kind of really well considered. But it's when it's delivered, it's completely natural, and it sums up maybe a belief or something that you haven't voiced yourself as well. And I think in some ways design or art or creative outputs are in a way that they are a lot of things condensed down into something very precise and concise to get a message across.
Yeah, Michael, I think we might have you back. Do we have him back?
I'm here now.
Yeah, you're there.
Yeah, you hear me?
Would you like to jump in on this conversation with us?
Ask him a difficult question now.
Okay, let me see. I'll go right to the back of the notebook for you now. But what would your influences be, Michael? You're saying you were abroad. Do you think, and with social media these days, do you think that really influences your thought process or how you create?
Yeah, definitely. Like James was saying, there's so much kind of visual influx from social media. It's going to influence you. But I think you have to be careful with that as well, because you could maybe look at too much stuff or be influenced too much by other designers or illustrators. Like especially, I know when I was starting out in college, I'd mimic other designers or illustrators a lot, and that was even with just access to a very small number of people. I think if I had Instagram when I was in college, I'd be just ripping everybody off left, right, and center. So that's something you've kind of got to be aware of with your influences. But I think
I have a question here for you. Sorry to jump across you. And it's from Mick on Vimeo, and he wants to know, how is working with a sibling so closely affect your work, and how do you resolve differences should they arise?
I think it's actually good. Yeah, because if you work in a design studio or in any kind of office environment, you have to be somewhat diplomatic. You can't just tell your work colleague to F off, but with your brother you can't. So you kind of cut out when you design with someone, you're trying to tell. So if you want to tell someone else, go, oh, maybe it's not working too well, and you're trying to be very soft about it. But we can kind of cut through all that really fast. If something's not working, just go, that's yeah, straight away. So I think in terms of that, it's good. I think anyway.
What are those difficulties though? I'm only joking. There's one here for yeah, go on. You have to give us the bit of dirt, like, as well. You've given us the upside of it.
I think it kind of the reason we're kind of working together is because I think it works so well. It's like you don't really know when we first started working, but we kind of realized we kind of work well together, and maybe it's kind of good because obviously coming from a very, very similar upbringing and background, we both studied together, so that's why there's not really as much difficulties. It's like we'll understand, I can explain something to him much easier than maybe someone else, and that comes from working longer and longer. I can explain an idea going, oh, it could be like, I could mention a style or something, or do you know that guy we saw the other day and that thing, and you know, we're making it look really like, and he might know what that means, you know, just some abstract thoughts like that. But maybe that's just from anyone working together too much. Like, it is a bit kind of strange working with a sibling. Like, there's like sometimes kind of bullshit sibling arguments and stuff like that, you know, but generally it's not too bad.
John, I have a question here for you from Jackie. Sorry, go on, guys. Yeah, you're good.
Well, I'm just going to say the reasons that are good are also the reasons that it's bad. Like, we can have a big argument where we're shouting and screaming about a color, you know, where you wouldn't do that in maybe a normal working environment with other colleagues, that and the brother.
Yeah. John, I have a question here from you from Jackie, and she says, I loved your work on the Waterford distilleries. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that was involved with that?
Well, yeah, we have a day. It's been a long running project. It's probably going on 5 years now, but I guess it started really with the vision from the guy who started up the distillery, which, you know, he's got a maverick outlook and a very, very clear idea of what he wanted to do. And I guess it all stemmed from there. We were given very much free rein on, the output there, and in terms of the creative approach, creative direction, and it's kind of built up over time. The whole brand now is built around content and stories, and it's all about authenticity. And I guess that's what we're really, we were there to kind of translate, I guess, what was inside this guy's vision into reality. And I guess there's so many influences and in terms of the process, but I guess one of the key factors that they wanted to, create a brand, I guess, that was a challenger to all the other whiskey brands out there. Something, I guess the current go-to look is almost a kind of Peaky Blinders type of, masculine wood and smoking, this kind of aesthetic. And we just eschewed that completely and went in a very different direction. But, I guess as well as an Irish whiskey, but it's an international brand in some senses. And there's hints of Irish, mysticism and, elements in there that are quite subtle and that maybe only revealed over time. And I guess there's an element of intrigue that, we've tried to carry through as well, that it's not something immediate and shouts at you and arrests your attention. It's kind of, it's for people who are kind of interested and curious. And it's a very different way to approach a consumer brand like that, where a lot of them want to shout and be the loudest person in the room. In some respects, this is a little bit more restrained, and I guess something that will stand the test of time and grow with the brand. But it was great to see how well it was received, because you work in isolation, on something very, very closely for a long time, and it's released out into the world where thousands of people have seen it, or millions will eventually, and it's quite a nerve-wracking experience, because a lot of it is on your heads for the success of the product. If people don't engage with it, it hasn't done its job. But when you start to see people on Instagram who are doing oil paintings of the bottle that you've designed, or just wooing over it, you're going, wow, you've actually made an impact there, and it's quite a different type of project. You don't often, with your projects, you release them, they're launched, and you don't really hear much feedback generally from the consumers side of the fence. So, but yeah, I mean, as a process, it was very, I guess, there was a lot of play in it. There was a lot of experimentation and a lot of going down different avenues and coming back and rationalizing things and editing. And it becomes literally like whiskey is distilled right down to the finest point, and quite I suppose minimal in its approach, but every component matters. So I hope that
this question is, yeah, I think that's answered it really well. This question is from Aaron, for any of the panel who would like to answer it, and he's just asking for a bit of advice about what will be the best way to enter into a career in design.
Career, I think. Well, I suppose has the guy studied graphic design? I suppose that's where you'd start there.
Well, we hope so. Or if not, he'll be on his way to the wish as we speak.
Yeah, I think when we started, in terms of more illustration anyway, it was just doing as much kind of personal work as possible to try and kind of get your work seen. Or even if you're just starting out, like, there's going to be always bands who want big posters and stuff like that. Like, so just trying to get kind of stuff like that even is a good way to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, well, from my kind of perspective, it's like, it's a really rewarding career if you really go for it. It's I've traveled the world, you meet amazing people, you make friends, I still really love what I do. But I think sometimes when, you're in college, it's all about you and the development of your style or whatever. And, when you come out into the commercial world, potentially things kind of flip on their head. And sometimes talent is only 1/3 of the, equation in some respects. That, you have to be a great creative, but there's so many other aspects to being, in a creative industry that, from your admin to your taxes to your, managing difficult clients to presentations. There's a whole scope of other experience that you need, or skill sets that you need. And I mean, a lot of it it's down to hard work. You really need to work hard. Nobody is successful without really putting in the graft. And I'm sure the guys would agree that it's been late nights, and it's something that I've done. I've now tried to not do, because you can see there's no future in working like that all the time. And I guess be aware it's not all glamorous wafting around being creative. I look at the guys' work, and it's fantastic. And that's the immediate thing, but it's very, very hard to see all the graft that's gone behind that sometimes. Yeah. I mean, it's stuff as well, like, don't sit in your bedroom waiting to be expected to be discovered. It's like, approach studios or people, say hello and be friendly, and kind of get your name out there. You kind of figure yourself out a bit as well by, chatting more to designers that are maybe up and running. I guess, other things like, be a master of your tools, but don't let that dictate what you are. It really is about, what's inside your head, your creative mind, and that really is where the value is, and yeah, maybe, sometimes we get a lot of portfolios through, and it's a lot of very glossy finished work, but sometimes we prefer to see the sketches and the that person's point of view, and the guys touched on it there, that there's so many influences out there and so much resources that it's, you're kind of looking at things and go, well, that does look a little bit like something I've seen before, so you don't have to be constantly original, but at least bring your own point of view to your work, and that's what I find stands out when we see portfolios coming through.
James, what would you think? John's talking about developing skills there, and what do you think that the strongest skill you've probably developed over the past few years of creating has been, and how have you honed and developed that skill?
Yeah, like you said, actually, probably some of the strongest skills is managing your time and managing clients and things like that. That's something that we found very difficult at the start, especially kind of working late nights. And a lot of the reason we were working late nights wasn't even because you're busy. It was just not managing time properly. And especially at the start, when you're not it's always kind of feast or famine in terms of the amount of work you were getting. Skills wise, I think in terms of actual design skills wise though, I think stuff like Photoshop skills and technical skills are usually the easiest. It's coming up with ideas faster, I suppose, would be the main thing over the years I've noticed, especially starting, and how long it takes. The more you work at it, it becomes easier to you still go through the same process of going through bad ideas, different things over and back, but you kind of tend to get through it a lot faster the more you kind of know you have a lot of stuff to fall back on and things you've tried before as well. So speed really and organization is kind of a lot of it the more you work in a way.
Yeah.
I know that you've all spoken about working abroad. So is there anywhere that you've worked outside Ireland? And could you give us a little insight into those experiences? John, we'll start with you there, if that's okay.
Yeah, I always wanted to kind of, I suppose, work abroad. It was kind of between New York and London at the time, and then I settled on moving over to London, and it was exactly, it was always what I wanted as a designer, I guess. Ireland's been a little bit limited at the time in terms of opportunities, and it was a place, I guess, to develop my skills and apply them, push limits, learn kind of new things. And I work in a country as well that had a strong design heritage. It was kind of important in part of the thinking of businesses and organizations that design is integral really to a lot of the those kind of companies and organizations. So and then there's then that door that you can open, and there's endless possibilities to work with the biggest brands, and really bright people, and culturally as well. And you talk about inspiration. It's quite intoxicating as a city to live in. And you can just walk down the street and be absolutely absorbed with everything from food to music to people to different languages spoken, and it was it's definitely we mentioned about how to get into graphic design and what we'd recommend. I think travel is, obviously we can't do a lot of it at the moment, but is a huge way to open your mind to a bigger world. And I got the chance to work on fantastic projects, with big brands from Adidas and Mercedes-Benz, and people that I wouldn't really had a chance to work with if I'd stayed in Ireland. So It's but you know, I always plan to come back to Ireland, and maybe I stay there longer than I thought I would, but yeah, decided to move back in the depths of a recession, so it wasn't the best idea. But they hope I am.
The recession seems to have been responsible for a lot of creative output for a lot of people. Like yourselves, you start the project when started, and you came home. Michael, what about yourself? What would one of your favorite projects have been to work on?
Out of the work we do now between us.
Yeah, either individually or yourself. Like, what have you really enjoyed? I know you do a lot of installation pieces and big style tarpaulin paintings, and you seem to kind of diversify between a host of things that you can turn your hand to anything, really.
Can't make up our mind what to do.
I think what we like the most is having that kind of variety. And like when we first started, it was to set up like a graphic design company. But when we started, we were like 26. We had no contacts, and we basically no idea what we were doing. But it was maybe after a year or two, we were kind of wondering what way we wanted the studio to go. And we kind of got less interested in doing branding work at that stage, because I think mainly because people were asking us to do websites and we weren't able to do them. And then we started pushing more into just making images. And like maybe if we were a designer in the 60s, we could just make posters, but you can't have a career kind of just, well, maybe you can, but we couldn't in Cork have a career just making posters. And that pushed more into just doing editorial illustration, which then went on to doing screen printing, and that developed then into painting and doing art installations. But throughout the whole thing, it was, I think, the variety that we were more interested in. That you can do one thing and then another week do something else. So I wouldn't say there's one thing in particular that I'd like the most. It's the ability to move between disciplines.
Yeah. I have a question here from Neil on Vimeo, and he would like to know, what kind of trends are you guys seeing in graphic design at the moment, or what do you kind of predict coming down the line?
Common, I don't know. I mean,
I think I was actually.
Go ahead, Michael.
Michael, you go there.
Was someone said something?
No, go ahead, Michael.
Yourself.
Thinking about this the other day. Yeah, we got emailed the other day by a student who they were doing some project to answer some questions, and that question came up as well. That question was more in relation to how COVID would change design. And I was kind of thinking, I actually have no idea. But then I was more thinking, if this led to a recession, I think that could change it. Like, I think at the start of the last recession, everybody, there was kind of sense of nostalgia. People were looking back to the 80s, you know, loads of old kind of vintage kind of sweet shops starting up. And that vintage look got really popular, or maybe a kind of DIY aesthetic or homemade aesthetic. And it went through everything from the kind of hipster look to design. Everything had that more organic kind of looking back to the past. So I don't know the future of it now. I think maybe COVID could change things. How it would change things, I'm not too sure. I know that doesn't really answer the question, but
yeah, I think trends. You know, I think it's best to avoid trends. You know, no one wants to be, you know, the person that thought a mullet was a good idea. You know, so it's, yeah, I guess, you know, it's just about creating work that's authentic, I guess, you know, and true. And if it creates a trend, brilliant, you know. But I guess craftsmanship never really goes out of fashion. If I was to look at, you know, graphic design in isolation as, you know, what are the trends at the moment, it's, you know, you can almost zoom out of Instagram and just, you can see there's, you know, the black and white trends, the you know, movable type, three-dimensional elements. It's, you know, repeated things, little kind of set of tropes, and then somebody, genuinely creative has started it, and then within 2 days everyone else has copied it. Whereas trends kind of explode really quickly and die out really quickly, and that's I guess what a trend is. But it's I wouldn't put my hat on anything and say, right, this is going to be the next big thing, and everybody does it. But I think touching on the pandemic side of things and how that might influence, it is interesting that design is a barometer of the state of play in society sometimes, and when there's optimism and economic fluidity or whatever, you often get to see that design may become more colorful or brighter or a bit more optimistic, and then maybe as things change that can become maybe a little bit more sober, but then it can maybe react to it and become more colorful again. It's interesting. There'll be a lot more design for property developments and things like that, and that has a certain kind of aesthetic in the boom times, and then that's all gone and something else replaces it. So I think it's classic stuff, well made, well designed, well thought out, will just stand the test of time anyway. So yeah,
James,
I'd say
you're grand, go on. James, do you think that lockdown has affected your creativity at all? That's from Tara on Facebook.
Yeah. As you can see, I am in the corner of my bedroom at the moment, whereas I would rather be we're in a shared studio group, so there's a bunch of different artists and stuff in there, but the building is closed at the moment. So while we can do some of our commercial stuff and the editorial illustration, a lot of the stuff we can't do and the bigger things. So yeah, it has affected. We were working on some paintings and things like that that's just stopped. And kind of with a lot of that stuff, when we were kind of tipping away on these paintings in the background, but we had gotten into a good kind of role, especially like over the summer when things kind of started dying down a bit. There was a bit of a lag because we had a lot of projects cancelled, so we had a bit more time to start working on the paintings. But it's that kind of like when our stuff gets cancelled or put off, certain commercial things get put off, we get a bit more time, but that's also when we have to leave the studio, so we can't do the paintings. So more so just that kind of frustration of not being able to do stuff. I don't know if it's changed our work or style or anything like that, but it's just it's kind of slowed everything down a little bit.
And Emer wants to know, and this is to you all, what's the worst piece of design you've ever seen? This is going to be inflammatory.
This I also think it's the best as well. The logo for the Irish School of Motoring.
Agreed.
What is it again?
The logo for the Irish School of Motoring.
Oh, I must check it out. I've never noticed it.
Oh, yeah. For anyone watching, just search Irish School of Motoring logo. It's actually the best. Okay. It's a picture of Ireland driving a car, and it looks kind of like a weird teddy bear thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think as well, isn't there?
Sorry.
The dubious placement of a gear stick.
There is. I think so.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It's a masterpiece. It's why we all got design.
Is it so bad it's good, or is it just bad?
Oh, it's brilliant. Love it.
I kind of like.
Just seen it. I just seen it. Yeah. I think I agree. I don't know. I think it might be so bad it's good.
It is. Yeah, it's kind of bordered on that, like, and it's been used for so long. Yeah, it's never changed, and I think the type goes around in a circle around it. Like, there's a lot of bad design choices as well and things like that. But I'd miss it if it was gone.
Definitely.
It's probably just so long.
It's brilliant. Love it.
Guys, if you had a bit of advice, If you had a bit of advice for somebody, a lot of people are asking this question starting out, and I suppose they're kind of looking for, as we all are these days, an easy way in. What would be like a good hack around design? Is there like something that as a designer working in the field that you could give somebody like a little insight into the little hacks that you do as designers?
In what way? How do you mean?
I think it's just around designing something as a designer. Have you any inside hacks or scoops that would help somebody who maybe isn't a professional?
Yeah, definitely. A good tip is to, if you're working on something, if you're getting stuck or it's not right, put it down and walk away. Sleep on it. Just go and do something completely different. Go for a walk and come back to it. And you'll often find that that just mental break from it will allow you to kind of reassess it. There's a good thing that Brian Eno and some other guy made. It's a set of it's a deck of playing cards, and if you're in a rut or whatever, you can just pick up a card and it'll suggest something. Turn it inside out, or look at it from a different perspective, or whatever. And those kind of mind changing kind of things help sometimes. They're if you're looking for a little hack or a knack, something like that is quite useful, I find.
Yeah, I think something else, even something you mentioned a while back when you were designing the whiskey label. I think sometimes if you look at something and if you were designing a whiskey label, you'd think that kind of smoky look and the old vintage text. Sometimes looking at the complete opposite of what would be expected as well, or something that would definitely think wouldn't work for a design. Maybe explore that route, and you can kind of sometimes come up with something more original.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any hacks, Michael, you'd like to share with the audience? You have to give away a closely guarded secret.
Me?
Sorry. The identical twin thing is getting me now. Michael, sorry.
Yeah. Hacks, yeah. Again, I don't know, things. The most basic thing is keep it simple. If you're not sure what you're doing, you're starting out, sometimes keep it simple or add loads in. Don't go in the middle. Keep it very, very simple, or just go crazy and add everything in maybe.
Michael, I'm going to ask you this one. Sean on Facebook has asked, do you use the design thinking process when you receive a piece of work, or what is your process?
Yeah, I hear a lot of people talking about the design thinking process. I don't really know what that is. I thought that was just thinking. But the process,
agreed.
I don't know if I think in terms of how a design thinking process works, or is it just the way I think or something? I don't know. But I suppose our process is well, I suppose we do different. I'll maybe explain the process of an editorial illustration. With that, we'll get an article in. And I think maybe it's the same with anything. You're trying to break down the main themes, or maybe what something's about, and trying to look at something from maybe a different angle to try and come up with an idea. And it's just start with sketchbooks. I think we use sketchbooks a lot and just try and get ideas down fast and quick. And when we're working on a kind of problem, if I can't explain it to James in a simple sketch in a few seconds, generally the idea won't work for us. So I think just that's kind of how we'd approach it. And after that, then you're just playing around with stuff. I don't think the whole process is linear. If you Google design thinking, I don't know, it probably comes up with some linear path of how things work, but I don't think it works like that. I think it's very much real over and back. You could be working on a sketchbook, looking at a book. You could be on the computer and Photoshop, and it's just very much chopping and changing until you just hit on something.
Neve Coffee wants to know, what would your best piece of advice for a new any new design graduates entering into the work field? John, I'll ask you that one if you start with that.
I probably touched upon it there earlier with a few tips and things, but yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, the idea of sitting around in your bedroom waiting to be discovered. Don't just get out there and start talking to people, and don't kind of wait around till your portfolio is finished. It's never finished, and you have to make a small selection of work that you think represents you or where you want to go, and and get out there. And the guys touched upon it earlier as well. It's like, there's lots of bands. Well, okay, they're not playing at the moment, but there's lots of opportunities to create stuff, and that you don't have to create it in a vacuum. Self-initiate projects. Find friends that have need a logo or a poster or whatever it might be, and keep active, and you're going to get a lot of rejection because there's probably not a lot of jobs out there at any time. So be kind of ready for that, but don't take it personally. And yeah, just keep the faith, I suppose. It can be a difficult process to kind of say leave college and get into the works place, but try and bridge that gap as well you can with just plenty. Keep working, keep learning, keep talking to people. If somebody doesn't have a job now, they may have it in a month's time or 6 months' time. So the more people you know and the more you know, the better it is for you. And travel when you can.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think networking is very important? Sorry, guys, I've just cut across you there. Go on, Farhad.
Yeah, I was just going to think. Again, what I was saying, sometimes you don't, like, people come out of college and straight away they want to go, I want to be working on these massive brands or these massive campaigns, and it doesn't kind of really work like that. I think you can do good work for friends. Like maybe some small festivals, even like weekend festivals. Just try and get involved in maybe a community of creatives who might need stuff and just really focus on making the work good. That's what I'd probably recommend, as good as possible, rather than trying to go, I want to get into the best company so I can make my work good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree with that as well. That there's no project that can't be great. Some people go in with a preconceived idea, and that's what they end up getting. So, go in and make it the best thing that you possibly can. Learn from it, but make sure that you're giving something back to the organization or whatever that you're working for. I think that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, even like in terms of looking for graphic design jobs and stuff, I kind of find sometimes there's the idea of like there's the big things and Pentagram and these massive companies, but like getting into a small company is sometimes much better than a bigger one, because you get into a bigger one, you become just kind of a small cog in a whole process, whereas in a small company, you get much closer to the projects, you get much closer, people are working together, so you have a chance to kind of learn more and also work on kind of more interesting stuff, as opposed to just doing one small part of one thing. You might get sometimes, there's kind of small companies, even if they don't have like what you might consider the most interesting clients, sometimes there's always like you can make it interesting yourself, and they kind of lead sometimes to better opportunities in the long run.
How important is networking in your field?
I don't really like networking, to be honest. It's, I don't know, maybe it's when I think of networking, I think of guys standing around golf clubs drinking wine or something. I don't know, it's just a bit dull, but I think networking, you I don't know, you kind of make your own network by default, and I think that's, if people know you and know what you do, that becomes some sort of a network that spreads out. And if you do great work and you're consistent with it, it builds out that kind of network. But, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just. It's not something I've kind of found to be very useful. You go to design conferences and things like that, and it's a lot of navel gazing and kind of it can be a bit just a bit dull. And I'd never found massive value in it. Sometimes you see a great talk. Actually, I saw the guys talk at Offset a few years ago, and that's interesting, and then you can take something from it. But yeah, the networking thing, I don't know. It's maybe just not for me.
Yeah,
guys, do you enjoy giving those talks? Like John is saying there, he said he saw you at Ofsted. Do you enjoy that end of your job?
No.
I kind of like it. I hate it. Like it's good to be asked. If someone asks you to talk like that, you're not going to say no, because it's like it's a big opportunity, and it's also a big, huge kind of pat on the back to say that your work is good enough that maybe people want to listen to you talk about it. But they're hard work to do.
Yeah, I think especially not doing them all the time. They like we don't do too many, and it's kind of rare. So when you have to give kind of a talk like that, there's a lot of work in actually preparing it and stuff. I actually find these kind of things much nicer to do, kind of panel discussions. Obviously, if you're in a room in a normal situation, it's kind of that, it's a nicer feeling if we're all sitting beside each other having a chat. And sometimes I kind of feel you get more out of these as well, because kind of like you mentioned, that navel gazing thing, it is, and even we did that, it's very much like a nice thing to do. I don't see it as a networking event. It's just like you get up and show your work and then you go for a load of pints afterwards. It's just something kind of fun to do. But the best part is after the talk, but even at things like Offset, I often find a lot of the panel discussions are kind of more interesting as well, where we're kind of talking about things, because sometimes those talks as well, it's like you're just showing your work, and everyone's seen your work. You can go online, it's on Instagram, it's on a website. So kind of these panel discussions are a bit more interesting in a way.
I think also in terms of networking, like we don't network much, but I think it's a lot softer than that. If like say now if we were doing this as a normal discussion, we might go for a pint afterwards, and we're not like out to get anything from each other, but it's just because we're all interested in design, we'll end up chatting to each other, and then who knows, maybe in a year's time someone might go, oh, do you remember that guy I met at the thing? He might be interested for this project or such and such a thing. And it's not that like you're out to sell yourself or you're out to get something of someone else. I think it's just being interested in design and wanting to meet other people interested in design. I think that's when networking is better. Not that you're trying to get something, you just want to be really involved in a community.
I'm going to finish up with this final question, and it's directed at Michael and James. But John, I think it's probably relevant to you as well in the creative process. He wants to ask you about your paintings and how do you go about creating them, and how does that work sit alongside your design career?
I don't know how it sits alongside that. We just do it, and I think when we make the paintings, we approach them the same as if we were doing a poster or an illustration in a way, visually. Like if we kind of just work them out on computer, and then after that, we're just basically kind of trying to transfer it onto a canvas. It probably changes a bit when it goes up, but the process is very much similar to our design process.
Yeah, I suppose they're in terms of making them, yeah, like we work a lot on the computer with them. We'd have, like, say if we're doing a painting or like one of those large tarpaulins, we might have 20, 30, 50 different variations, kind of like designing that in a logo or something. we're kind of always playing around with them. We would have like a couple of files with those images, so kind of working digitally of variations that we didn't use and stuff. There'll be elements at the moment of those paintings. There's lots of different elements going on, so we'll use them almost like building blocks as well for building other paintings, and kind of like that. And it's just a process of playing around. It's kind of play more than anything, really.
Neve Coffey has asked this question: with COVID, what would you say is the best way to show a future employer your portfolio? Because I suppose, you know, students that are graduating these days, they can't just rock up to an office. So what do you think would be the best way to get their work in to a future employer?
Do they rock up to offices?
I used to, but it's been a while for me.
Yeah.
No, I would say, I mean, look, everyone has an Instagram account, and you can see, well, I don't know, 9, 12 tiles on your phone. You can make an impression, even though I don't like particularly the medium for, you know, seeing detail or understanding much about an image. It's a great medium for that, you know, immediacy. But I actually find an old school PDF can be a little bit more concise than, you know, sending a link and firing you off to a website and you're kind of figuring out the navigation and figuring out what, you know, what's happening. Sometimes a very well edited, you know, PDF can, you know, attach to an email with a friendly introduction. It can work pretty well.
Yeah, I'd say that's the best way. Just a PDF and a simple email, and don't send like one generic email to 50 different agencies. You know, show that like you at least know what the company is about and the kind of work they do. Like sometimes, like we don't have staff because we're just doing more art and illustration stuff. But we sometimes get email portfolios that would just have no relevance to the kind of work we do. And I've gotten emails where it says hello and it's just some random name because they've cut and pasted it from another email without changing it. And keep the file size low. You don't send a massive PDF.
In terms of a in terms of a portfolio as well, I think, like you mentioned, sometimes a simple PDF. Sometimes a website can get in the way of a portfolio, especially if there's too much going on. It's difficult. It's kind of sometimes it's a different thing, and it's difficult to see an individual piece or an individual project. So that PDF, in terms of what you put into the PDF, I think as well, put in the kind of work you want to do. Like a lot of times when I see students, they'll have a project that they worked on and that might be good, but it might be a kind of work that they actually have no interest in doing. So like if you've no interest in designing labels for whiskey bottles, don't put in a project with labels for whiskey bottles in your portfolio. Put in the kind of work you want to do as well. Like within reason, obviously, you have to get that kind of stuff as well. But and also put in just good work, because you kind of often just get remembered for the average one in as well. I think it's often better to have 3 or 4 good pieces than trying to bulk it up to 10 or 20 pieces where half of them are shit, basically. It's kind of just show the best work as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people are saying that. Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying sometimes if you're sending out a portfolio, you'll have like work that you think is good, but you think it's not, like the client isn't good or something. Or sometimes you get a portfolio in and it's like a big client, and it's nice maybe to see that they can work with a big client or manage a thing, but it's that stuff I think you can learn anyway. I'd rather see an interesting poster for some local band than just reams of just kind of bad work for a bigger client.
Yeah, big time. I always like to see the sketches and the thought process on certain projects, and I've hired people on, you know, the last thing in their portfolio that they would have expected. You know, some people come with, as you say, end-to-end project that, you know, they see maybe the type of project that we would deliver and say, well, look, I can do this, the whole thing. And where I'm more interested in a point of view and I suppose a skill there that is individual to them. But you know, it's it's a very it's a difficult process, and don't be afraid to send in a portfolio or something, and you know, maybe ask for a bit of feedback on it rather than just firing it in and hoping to get a job the next day. So, you know, I've often given people a little bit of advice to, you know, say, well, actually chuck that project out, that's really strong, and try it with that. And, you know, sometimes it's a bit of trial and error in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, I think that we're good for today. I'd like to thank you so much for taking part in CreateFest 2020's design panel. You've given great insight into the design world and your own work especially. So thanks, John, thanks, Michael, and thanks, James. Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Thanks a lot.